People don't return to strength that begs. They don't return to chaos dressed up as confidence. They return to order. They return to someone who has taken responsibility for his own life so completely that being around him feels like standing on solid ground after weeks at sea. If you are acting in ways designed to pull someone back toward you, you've already lost the game, because neediness is not invisible. It leaks through your words, your posture, your timing, and your silences. Human beings are exquisitely sensitive to desperation. And nothing corrodes attraction faster than the sense that someone else is trying to use you to fill a hole they refuse to face themselves. You become magnetic when you stop orienting your life around being chosen and start orienting it around being worthy of choosing. That does not mean posturing or pretending or playing shallow dominance games. It means cleaning up the parts of your life you've been avoiding. It means telling the truth, especially to yourself, about where you are weak, resentful, lazy, or afraid. When a man stands up straight, not physically but morally, when he decides that his days will be ordered by responsibility rather than impulse, something changes in how he occupies space in the world. He speaks differently. He listens differently. He doesn't rush to fill silence because silence doesn't terrify him anymore. Women don't return to men who promise them the world. They return to men whose presence suggests the world is already in order, or at least moving in that direction. If your life is a mess, if your finances are chaotic, if your emotions swing wildly between hope and bitterness, no amount of charm will compensate for that instability. Stability is not boring. Stability is rare. Stability signals safety, and safety is not the opposite of excitement. It's the foundation that allows excitement to last without turning into destruction. You act in a way that invites return when you stop explaining yourself excessively. Over-explanation is a confession of insecurity. A man who trusts his own judgment doesn't feel compelled to justify every boundary or decision. He says no when no is required, and he doesn't apologize for existing. This doesn't make him cruel. It makes him clear. Clarity is kindness. Ambiguity born of fear is not compassion. It is manipulation disguised as politeness. You also become someone others come back to when you stop making your emotional state their responsibility. If your happiness rises and falls entirely on someone else's attention, you've handed them a burden they never agreed to carry. That weight eventually crushes desire. When you build a life that contains meaning independent of romantic validation, work that matters, discipline that strengthens you, friendships that are honest, you remove that burden. You don't need saving, and paradoxically, that makes people want to be near you. There is something deeply attractive about someone who can sit with discomfort without immediately numbing it or externalizing it. Life is suffering. That's not a slogan, it's a fact. When you accept that and still move forward voluntarily, you radiate a kind of quiet courage. You don't complain endlessly. You don't blame the world, women, fate, or your past for your present failures. You pick up the heaviest thing you can carry, and you carry it. That posture changes how others perceive you, often without them being able to articulate why. If someone leaves and you respond with dignity rather than collapse, you leave a psychological imprint that lingers. Dignity does not mean emotional coldness. It means you acknowledge the pain honestly without weaponizing it. You don't punish someone for leaving by self-destructing or by begging them to come back. You say, in action if not in words, I am hurt, but I am still standing. That is rare. That is memorable. You act in a way that draws people back when you are oriented toward growth rather than resentment. Resentment poisons everything it touches. It distorts perception and justifies stagnation. Growth, on the other hand, is visible. People can sense when someone is becoming more than they were 6 months ago. They hear it in the way you speak about the future. They see it in your habits. They feel it in your presence. Growth signals hope, and hope is compelling. You don't chase. Chasing communicates that you believe value exists outside of you and must be captured before it escapes. Instead, you build. You build competence. You build character. You build a life that can withstand disappointment. When someone walks away from that, they don't walk away from emptiness. They walk away from something substantial. And substantial things have gravity. You also tell the truth, even when it costs you in the short term. Lies are short-term solutions that create long-term chaos. When you tell the truth calmly and precisely, you establish trust with yourself first. That internal alignment makes you less reactive, less manipulative, and less afraid of loss. Fear of loss drives most destructive behavior in relationships. Remove that fear by becoming someone who can survive loss, and you remove the need to control. Act like someone who has standards, not ultimatums. Standards are internal commitments. Ultimatums are external threats. When you know what you will and will not tolerate, you don't need to announce it loudly. You simply act accordingly. This creates a sense of boundaries that are firm without being aggressive. Boundaries signal Self-respect, and self-respect is contagious. Finally, you act like someone whose life has direction. Direction is more important than speed. You don't have to have everything figured out, but you must be moving towards something meaningful. Aimlessness is unsettling. Direction gives people confidence that time spent with you is not time wasted. When someone leaves a person with direction, they often feel the absence of that forward momentum more sharply than they expected. When you embody responsibility, truth, stability, and growth, you stop trying to be irresistible and start being real. And reality, when properly ordered, has a pull that games and tactics can never replicate. Attraction begins where excuses end. The moment a person decides that their life is primarily someone else's responsibility, they step into weakness, and weakness quietly repels. Not because people are cruel, but because chaos is dangerous. When you refuse to take responsibility for your own existence, you broadcast instability, and no amount of charm can disguise it for long. Responsibility is not a burden placed on you by the world. It is the voluntary acceptance of the fact that your actions matter and that your future is shaped by what you choose to carry today. Taking responsibility starts with an honest inventory of your life. Not the flattering version, not the version you explain to others, but the brutal, private truth. Are your days ordered or scattered? Do you do what you say you will do, even when no one is watching? Are you competent in at least one domain that requires sustained effort and discipline? If the answer is no, then attraction is not your real problem. Disorganization, people are drawn to those who can create order out of chaos, first in themselves and then in the world around them. There is something deeply unsettling about a man who demands understanding without earning respect. He wants sympathy for his pain, but refuses to confront the habits that created it. He wants love without sacrifice, validation without effort, and loyalty without leadership. That posture creates resentment, both in him and in those around him. Resentment corrodes attraction because it turns potential into blame. When you take responsibility, you cut resentment off at its root. You stop asking, why did this happen to me? And start asking, what part did I play? And what can I do differently? Responsibility means recognizing that your emotional state is not a bargaining chip. If your mood depends entirely on how someone else treats you, you've handed them control over your inner life. That is not intimacy, that is dependence. Dependence feels heavy to others even if they can't articulate why. Emotional self-regulation, on the other hand, signals maturity. When you can feel pain without becoming bitter, disappointment without becoming vengeful, and desire without becoming desperate, you communicate strength without saying a word. This responsibility extends into the smallest details of daily life. The state of your living space matters. The way you manage your body matters. The discipline with which you approach your work matters. These are not superficial signals. They are evidence. Evidence that you can delay gratification. Evidence that you can plan, commit, and follow through. Evidence that you respect yourself enough to impose structure on your impulses. People trust evidence far more than promises, and trust is the foundation of attraction. Many people believe attraction is about intensity, about passion without restraint. But unrestrained intensity burns hot and dies fast. Responsibility creates a different kind of intensity, one that is sustainable. When you are grounded, when your life is not constantly on the brink of collapse, your energy becomes focused rather than scattered. Focus is compelling. It makes conversations sharper, decisions cleaner, and relationships more secure. There is also a moral dimension to responsibility that people often ignore. When you accept responsibility, you implicitly state that you are capable of being accountable. Accountability creates safety. Safety allows vulnerability. Vulnerability, when it rests on a foundation of strength rather than fragility, deepens connection. Without responsibility, vulnerability turns into emotional dumping. With responsibility, vulnerability becomes intimacy. You cannot outsource meaning. If you expect a relationship to give your life purpose, you will suffocate it. Meaning comes from choosing something difficult and worthwhile and pursuing it despite resistance. That pursuit reshapes your identity. You become someone with momentum. Momentum changes how people experience you. They don't feel like they are dragging you forward or holding you together. They feel like they are standing next to someone who is moving, and movement is contagious. Responsibility also demands truth. You cannot take responsibility for a lie, because a lie fractures reality. When you lie, even in small ways, you create internal division. Part of you knows the truth, and part of you performs a story. That division leaks out as anxiety, defensiveness, and inconsistency. Truth aligns you internally. Alignment produces calm. Calm presence is attractive because it suggests reliability under pressure. This is why people often return to someone who has changed, not superficially, but fundamentally. They sense that the chaos they once experienced is no longer there. The volatility has been replaced by steadiness. The excuses have been replaced by action. The bitterness has been replaced by clarity. Change of this kind cannot be faked because it shows up in behavior over time. It shows up in how you handle conflict, how you respond to silence, how you act when things don't go your way. Taking responsibility also means accepting that rejection is information, not a verdict on your worth. When someone leaves, the irresponsible response is collapse or blame. The responsible response is reflection. What was missing? What was avoided? What standards were unclear? Reflection does not mean self-loathing. It means precise self-correction. Precision is powerful. It allows growth without shame. As responsibility increases, so does your capacity to choose rather than react. Reaction is driven by fear and impulse. Choice is driven by values. Values give your behavior consistency, and consistency builds trust. Trust over time creates attachment that does not need manipulation to survive. People feel secure returning to someone whose values do not shift with convenience. The paradox is that when you fully accept responsibility for your life, you stop trying to control others. You no longer need to chase, convince, or perform. Your life itself becomes the argument, not through display, but through substance. And substance has weight. Weight creates gravity. People may drift away from gravity temporarily, but they feel its absence long after they've left. Dignity, boundaries, and emotional independence are not optional traits. They are fundamental pillars of a life that commands respect and draws people toward it naturally. They are not learned in a day, nor are they superficial tricks to manipulate attention. They are the cumulative result of understanding who you are, what you value, and what you will tolerate. Without these, attraction becomes unstable, fleeting, and shallow because people are not drawn to uncertainty in the long term. They are drawn to present, CE, reliability, and a calm authority that quietly signals, I know who I am, and I am not afraid to be that person. Dignity begins with the refusal to compromise your self-respect for temporary comfort or validation. Too many people think they can buy attention by lowering standards, over-apologizing, or bending themselves to fit someone else's expectations. The truth is that dignity is the opposite of negotiation with one's core values. It is the recognition that your existence has inherent worth, and that worth is not dependent on someone else acknowledging it. Acting with dignity means that when hurt occurs, you acknowledge it honestly, but do not weaponize it. You do not collapse or lash out in attempts to control someone else's behavior. Pain is processed internally first, measured against reality, and only then expressed constructively if expression is necessary. Dignity in action creates a subtle but undeniable power. It communicates to others that you are anchored, unshakable, and capable of navigating life's inevitable turbulence without losing yourself. Boundaries are the practical expression of dignity. They are not walls erected out of fear, but clear markers of what you will and will not accept. Setting boundaries requires knowing yourself in intimate detail. What drains you, what strengthens you, what compromises your integrity, and what fuels your growth. A boundary communicates a commitment to yourself and your values. It is not about controlling others. It is about protecting the space you need to exist fully. Many people mistake boundaries for rigidity, but in reality they are the scaffolding of freedom. Without boundaries, relationships become a tug of war, and the person who is constantly bending loses authority over their own life. Boundaries, when applied consistently, signal to others that your time, attention, and energy are not infinite. This scarcity, grounded in self-respect rather than manipulation, generates attraction because people are drawn to what is meaningful and not disposable. Emotional independence is the third dimension of this triad. It is the ability to feel deeply without being enslaved to the fluctuations of other people's moods or actions. Emotional dependence creates pressure, anxiety, and subtle forms of coercion. When someone senses that your happiness is contingent on their behavior, it activates guilt, defensiveness, and avoidance. Conversely, when you cultivate emotional independence, your interactions are freer and more genuine. You can care without clinging, love without begging, and invest without overextending. Emotional independence does not mean coldness or detachment. It means stability and self-sovereignty. It is the realization that while others can enhance your life, they do not define it. These three qualities, dignity, boundaries, and emotional independence, interact in a way that produces a magnetic presence. Dignity informs boundaries. Boundaries protect emotional independence, and emotional independence reinforces dignity. Without one, the others are weakened. For instance, without boundaries, dignity becomes performative. Without emotional independence, boundaries feel like walls of fear rather than expressions of strength. Together, they create a feedback loop of internal consistency that is noticeable to everyone around you. People may not consciously identify it, but they respond to it instinctively. Consider the dynamics of conflict. Most people escalate conflicts through defensivine, SS, blame, or emotional overreaction. These behaviors are rooted in insecurity and fear. A person with dignity and emotional independence approaches conflict differently. They listen carefully, articulate their truth without aggression, and maintain composure regardless of the other person's emotional intensity. Their boundaries are clear, so they do not allow manipulation or coercion. This approach is not only more effective in resolving issues, but also profoundly attractive because it signals competence, emotional stability, and self-mastery. People naturally gravitate towards someone who can navigate tension without becoming entangled in it. Another critical aspect is consistency. Boundaries and dignity must not be situational. They cannot fluctuate with convenience or pressure. Inconsistency undermines trust. People need to know that when you say no, you mean it, and when you say yes, it is genuine. Consistent behavior is a powerful psychological signal. It communicates that you are reliable, predictable in your integrity, and therefore safe to invest in emotionally. When people feel safe, they are far more likely to return, not because they are manipulated, but because they sense stability in your presence. Emotional independence also allows for authentic engagement. When you are not preoccupied with winning approval or soothing anxiety, you can be fully present in interactions. Your attention is not a commodity to be bargained for, and your responses are not reactive but intentional. This kind of presence is rare because most people operate under subtle pressure to perform for validation. Presence grounded in independence communicates confidence without arrogance, curiosity without neediness, and compassion without compromise of self. Dignity also intersects with self-discipline. A dignified person does not allow transient discomfort, fear, or desire to override long-term values. They take responsibility for their actions, maintain integrity even when unobserved, and refrain from impulsive gratification that undermines their principles. Discipline is often invisible, but it leaves traces in posture, speech, and choice. It produces a quiet authority that attracts because it promises reliability and competence, qualities that are inherently desirable in any relationship. The combination of dignity, boundaries, and emotional independence also transforms the perception of scarcity. When someone operates from weakness, neediness, or insecurity, they act as though attention, affection, or approval are commodities that must be extracted at all costs. This creates pressure and repels the very connection they seek. In contrast, someone grounded in these three principles treats their attention and energy as valuable but not desperate. They are selective, deliberate, and intentional. Scarcity in this sense is not about gamesmanship, it is about self-respect. And self-respect has a gravitational pull that superficial charm cannot replicate. Moreover, these traits foster self-reflection and growth. Dignity demands accountability. Boundaries demand self-knowledge. Emotional independence demands introspection. Growth is attractive because it signals that a person is evolving rather than stagnating. People are instinctively drawn to those who are moving upward, not because of fear of loss, but because progress radiates energy, optimism, and competence. When someone recognizes that your life is governed by these internal principles, they perceive depth, reliability, and resilience, qualities that inspire loyalty and repeated return. It is also important to note that these principles are active, not passive. They are enacted moment by moment, choice by choice. You do not declare dignity, you act it out. You do not set boundaries once and forget them, you uphold them consistently. You do not claim emotional independence, you practice it every time you feel the urge to react to external validation. This consistency produces integrity, and integrity is magnetic. People do not simply return to charm or performance, they return to someone whose life is coherent, intentional, and aligned with core principles. Finally, the cultivation of dignity, boundaries, and emotional independence is fundamentally about control over yourself, not others. People often misinterpret attraction as a game of manipulation or persuasion, but real attraction is an emergent property of self-mastery. When your life is organized, your mind is clear, and your emotions are contained, you create a space that is safe yet stimulating. People return to that space repeatedly, not because they are forced, but because it offers stability, respect, and authenticity, qualities that are rare in a world dominated by chaos and pretense. When practiced consistently, these qualities make the difference between fleeting attention and lasting presence. They produce a life that is not reactive, not defined by others, but robust enough to withstand rejection, disappointment, or temporary absence. They create a kind of silent magnetism, an invisible gravita. Shinal field shaped not by superficial traits, but by the deep architecture of personal responsibility, moral clarity, and emotional resilience. In this environment, people are not coerced or convinced to return. They are naturally drawn back because being in proximity to someone who embodies dignity, maintains boundaries, and practices emotional independence feels like returning home to a place of order, strength, and truth. Growth, direction, and meaning form the backbone of a life that is not only attractive, but magnetic in ways that superficial charm can never achieve. People are instinctively drawn to motion and progress. Stagnation, on the other hand, is inherently repulsive, not because it lacks value, but because it signals fear, complacency, and the absence of purpose. Growth begins with the recognition that you are not defined by your current state, but by the trajectory of your life, the deliberate movement towards something greater than yourself. This movement is compelling because it communicates that your existence is intentional, that your energy is directed, and that your decisions are governed by something deeper than immediate gratification. Growth is not linear, and it is rarely comfortable. It demands self-confrontation and honesty about where you have failed, where you have avoided responsibility, and where your habits undermine your potential. People who are unwilling to face these truths often seek comfort in routine, distraction, or blame. They wait for external circumstances or external validation to change their life. But growth is an internal phenomenon. It begins with the courage to acknowledge weakness and the commitment to transform it. When someone witnesses this transformation, when they see a person actively becoming stronger, wiser, and more capable, it resonates on a primal level. It communicates that time spent in proximity to this person is not wasted, that the relationship exists within a landscape of upward motion rather than drift. Direction is the practical manifestation of growth. It is not enough to simply improve in isolation. Your improvement must be aligned with a purpose that extends beyond momentary pleasure. Direction is what transforms effort into influence. It is what makes your life intelligible to others. When you have direction, your actions are coherent, your decisions purposeful, and your energy focused. People are drawn to direction because it signals reliability. A man or woman without direction is like a ship adrift. The longer you are near them, the more you sense the instability of their world. Direction communicates that even in uncertainty, you are capable of navigating life's challenges with competence and foresight. Meaning is the psychological fuel that sustains growth and gives direction its weight. Meaning emerges when your daily actions are aligned with values, principles, and long-term goals that matter to you deeply. Without meaning, growth can feel hollow and direction can feel arbitrary. People can sense when a person operates without an internal compass. There is a subtle anxiety, a tension that signals aimlessness. Conversely, when someone acts from a place of authentic meaning, their presence carries weight. Their words, their decisions, and their demeanor are imbued with purpose. Meaning makes small gestures resonate more, decisions appear more consequential, and me spent with them feel significant. People return to meaning because it signals life, vitality, and depth. Growth also changes how you handle adversity. Most people react to challenges with fear, blame, or avoidance. Growth-oriented individuals approach adversity as a test, a lesson, or an opportunity for refinement. This approach communicates resilience and adaptability. It signals to others that temporary setbacks will not destabilize you and that your trajectory is not contingent on external conditions. Resilience is inherently attractive because it creates psychological safety. People instinctively return to those who are resilient because they offer a sense of stability even amid chaos. Another aspect of growth is competence. Competence is not about superficial skill or performance meant to impress. It is about mastery in domains that matter. It might be intellectual, physical, creative, or emotional. The key is consistency and depth. Competence signals that you can navigate complexity, handle responsibility, and contribute meaningfully. People are drawn to competence because it suggests security, reliability, and the potential for partnership. It is magnetic because it conveys that your life is structured, productive, and moving toward a horizon that is bigger than immediate desires. Direction also produces focus. Focus is rare in a world of distraction. A focused person is not scattered by every whim, news cycle, or social pressure. They know what matters, and they act accordingly. Focus creates anticipation and intrigue because it implies that time with you is not casual, it is consequential. People sense that your life has a framework and that being near you places them within that framework. Direction without focus is diffuse and unconvincing. Focus without direction is empty. Together they signal that your life is coherent. And coherence is deeply compelling. Meaning interacts with growth and direction in a psychological ecosystem. When someone has meaning, they make decisions based on principles rather than impulses. They do not flail in response to fleeting emotions or social pressure. Their relationships, work, and ambitions are extensions of their internal value system. This consistency produces trust, and trust generates attachment. People return to individuals whose lives are guided by meaning because it signals reliability and depth. Meaning ensures that your movement through life is not arbitrary but consequential, and this creates an irresistible gravitational pull. Growth also produces authenticity. The person who is committed to real development cannot maintain pretense. Lies, excuses, and shallow posturing are incompatible with sustained self-improvement. Authenticity resonates on a fundamental level because it is easily perceived. People may not consciously articulate why they feel drawn to someone, but they intuitively sense when they are in the presence of someone who is real, who is actively shaping themselves, and who lives according to principles rather than performance. Authenticity reinforced by growth becomes a subtle form of authority and magnetism. Moreover, direction and meaning transform how you handle presence and absence in relationships. Many people cling when faced with distance or uncertainty, projecting neediness and insecurity. But a person anchored in growth, direction, and meaning does not rely on constant reinforcement for their sense of self-worth. They can experience absence without collapse because their life is already fulfilling, structured, and purposeful. This independence paradoxically increases attraction because scarcity of need communicates value and stability. People return to those whose lives they sense are rich, full, and moving forward because proximity to that energy feels nourishing rather than demanding. Growth, direction, and meaning also amplify self-respect. As you grow, develop focus, and act according to principle, you begin to demand more of yourself and from others. You no longer tolerate patterns, relationships, or behaviors that undermine your trajectory. This self-respect is inherently attractive because it signals that your time, energy, and attention are not free commodities. When someone recognizes that your presence is not casual, they are drawn to it with intention, valuing it for the substance it provides rather than the superficial performance it might project. Finally, these principles operate on both a practical and symbolic level. Practically, growth ensures competence, direction ensures productivity, and meaning ensures purpose. Symbolically, together, they create a presence that is magnetic. They communicate that your life is coherent, that you are moving with intention, and that time spent near you is valuable. People are drawn to these qualities not because they are being persuaded or manipulated, but because human beings are inherently attracted to motion, vitality, and authenticity. Growth, direction, and meaning produce an invisible gravitational field, one that pulls people toward you repeatedly, often without conscious explanation, because proximity to it feels safe, stimulating, and deeply resonant with the human instinct for progress, stability, and significance. When you combine radical self-responsibility, unwavering dignity, clear boundaries, emotional independence, growth, direction, and authentic meaning, you create a life that is magnetic in a way nothing superficial ever could. People are drawn not to desperation, charm, or manipulation, but to presence, an energy forged through strength, integrity, and purpose. Attraction becomes a natural byproduct of the life you lead, not a pursuit, because you are no longer asking the world or anyone else to validate your worth. You have claimed it for yourself. Stability, authenticity, and progress signal safety and opportunity, creating a gravitational pull that draws the right people back into your orbit repeatedly. Relationships thrive when you are grounded, resilient, and growing, and absence or rejection no longer shakes your foundation, but highlights your independence. NCE. Ultimately, living with responsibility, dignity, and purpose transforms you into someone people instinctively respect, admire, and want to be around, not because you chase them, but because you are impossible to ignore when your life is fully aligned with your highest values. Stand strong, grow relentlessly, and let your presence speak louder than your words.